Kenya will be the next Singapore. Only tough decisions will get us to the Singapore League. If our leaders worked as hard as our citizens, would be the Singapore of Africa. If Singapore made it to the first world, we too can make it. We've heard these lines time and again from our leaders. Apparently, they want Kenya to be like Singapore. Okay then, let's compare. First, the hard numbers. In 2024, Kenya's GDP per capita was about $2,206. Singapore's was roughly $88,500. That's around 40 times higher. Population? Kenya is a nation of 53 to 54 million. Singapore is just over 6 million. Size didn't save us, but smallness didn't limit them. On debt, we strain to service our loans. But while Singapore owes much more on paper, they hold state assets and savings to back it up. How about income from work? Well, the typical full-time worker in Singapore took home a median of about $5,500 a month in 2024. That's about 710,000 Kenya shillings. Here in Kenya, official data shows average earnings are 10 times less, at about 74,000 shillings a month, with entry-level jobs being at an average 30,000 a month. Many more Kenyans are still waiting for their first payslip. How about education and skills? Singapore topped the latest PISA rankings. That's a global assessment of 15-year-olds from different countries to gauge their knowledge and understanding of math, science, and reading. Kenya is not even ranked by PISA. So just how did Singapore do it? Well, they certainly didn't just talk their way into prosperity. They built clean, predictable institutions. Let me explain. Fiscal honesty before fiscal heroics. A credible medium-term plan that matches revenue to realistic spending. Ring-fencing development outlays from the daily political seasons. They also formulated industrial policy that picks problems, not pet projects, that picks the bottlenecks such as power costs, logistics, port clearance, standards, and removes them with deadlines. They basically make exports boringly reliable. They have schools that teach for the economy we actually want. Formal jobs, not formal slogans. They cut the costs of formality. That's e-registration, one-stop tax and compliance. They reward farms that grow payrolls, exports and training hours, not those that can afford the longest motorcades. And on anti-corruption, that is done administratively, not acrimoniously. Digital tenders by default, public contracts and beneficial ownership online. Penalties that arrive swiftly enough to deter the next deal. Singapore has cities that cut friction, minutes saved from port to factory to airport. If a permit takes weeks here in Kenya, it takes just hours there. And now allow me permission to be blunt. None of what they have done was developed by speeches. You see, we can't talk our way to progress. We have to work through it. If words alone were enough, we've talked much more than Singapore ever has. So what's the point of departure? Singapore chose competence over clientelism, measurement over megalomania, and discipline over drama. It chose to count, then to do. We choose too often to announce. Economies do not transform by rhetoric. They transform when the boring things get done, on time, on budget, without kickbacks, so often that it becomes culture. So while we endlessly promise, proclaim, predict, Singapore chose consistency, competence, and consequence, while we choose, too often, announcements. So I hope we can settle this debate once and for all. No, Kenya is not like Singapore. That's my take.
Hi fam, your comedian president is at it again with yet another comic episode.
We must do it. E-housing, we must do it. Imagine Singapore was like Kenya 60 years ago. Today in Singapore, 95% of people are homeowners. They are in the first world. In Kenya, it is the opposite. 7 million people are living in slums. We are in the third world. We are going to change this country. Believe you me. Hii inchi tutaibadilisha. We have what it takes as a nation. There is no reason why we cannot catch up with Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea. There is no reason we can catch up with them if we just make the right decisions. And I'm going to go out of my way to make sure we make those decisions.
Bruh, stop dreaming. Because while you're busy dreaming of turning Kenya into Singapore, Singaporeans are busy designing their future. If we need to copy their Singaporeans' blueprint to develop Kenya and grow our infrastructure and everything, then we need to start with principles, integrity. We need to cut corruption, because in Singapore, the rule of law is applied equally to everyone. But in Kenya, impunity is the common norm. So we are not going to make Kenya like Singapore. Singapore rewards meritocracy, while in Kenya we reward connections and those who are loyal to the loyalists. That's what our government basically does. If you look at their infrastructure and the things that they did, but basically, if laughter was the one that builds infrastructure like Kenya, we would have surpassed Singapore, Dubai, UAE, and all the other countries, because we have a bunch of comedians like Mr. President. See, Singaporeans were capable of transforming a swamp into a global financial hub 30 years ago. But for us, until today, we are still busy in parliament and the president meetings and cabinet meetings, busy having discussions on how to create task forces, on how to discuss on how to create another task force. That's what we basically does. Creating reports of other reports on reports that we created. We just basically go in cycles of everything. And you still wait for us to have any development. From where is it these developments are going to come from? We are busy fixing potholes while these Singaporeans are designing their future. The president, what he's trying to do is sell the housing project narrative, which is a scam, because he doesn't even have like proper infrastructure, like the people who are supposed to own the houses. Singaporeans did not focus on getting people own houses. They focused on making people's lives manageable, because people can build their own houses. But our president is basically selling us the idea of the government building us houses that we pay for on public land that is owned by public. Then they sell the houses to us. I mean, how is that not a scam? Why are we... Mr. President, you said you have a PhD, but we can actually like be able to, you know, to see your game tunaionea 18. So we're not going to be like Singapore, not now, because this is just another promise that came, you know, by 2030 Kenya will be like Dubai, like Minneapolis, like Atlanta, like New York. Mr. President, stop dreaming. That time that you're wasting while you're making these speeches, you could actually use that time to work for Kenyans. You need to be in the, you know, in the field, and or just rather sit in the office and work, because that's how countries are built. But you see, President Lee Kuan Yew, he can proudly look at Singapore right now, the infrastructure, the skyscrapers, and say, 30 years ago, we had a plan. But in Kenya, the best thing we can do is to look at a wheelbarrow and say, the politicians had a 30-minute speech, because that's the best thing that we usually do, talks that amount to nothing. That's it. So, Mr. President, just sell your housing agenda, but don't fool Kenyans that we are going to be like Singapore. Not even in the next 30 years. We cannot. Until principles, integrity, and all that, and the upholding rule of law is actually a thing in Kenya, then only then we can surpass, or rather we can be close to Singapore. But from that, it's just a dream. Amko kakojoe.
Hi Kenyans, mi sina maneno mengi. All I want to say is Ruto must go, like yesterday. Bye.
Ati black chocolate ni fine melanin bana kutoka nikapate. Kanapenda kenye mi wanapenda, so kanapenda toto chupa na hali ya nono.
Madam na kudai, umedunga mini na unapenda mangwai. Una dance fit, unawacha nikismile. Ama niko high, you realize I'm nice.
Kono moja mbele, gine yende rembe. Pile up, yoni.
Enyewe, Ruto must go. Enyewe, Ruto must go. By the way, Ruto must go. Enyewe, Ruto must go. Wash fire, Ruto must go. Enyewe, Ruto must go. By the way, Ruto must go.